I'm often asked how you should drink malt whisky, and I draw a distinction between drinking for enjoyment and how best to appreciate malt whisky. When you're drinking merely for enjoyment, you drink it how you like, typically in a cut glass tumbler like this, with water, without water, with ice, without ice, even with Coca-Cola as they drink it in some parts of the world, but I wouldn't recommend that. If you're drinking for appreciation, the most important rule, it's essential to have an appropriate glass. And by appropriate, I mean a glass which will gather and present the aroma of the whisky as well as the flavour, because appreciation is done as much with the nose as with the tongue. And the second thing you need is some water. The water opens up the nose and makes it more accessible. You swirl the whisky in the glass and you nose it. Be careful when you don't know the strength of the whisky, because sometimes it's quite prickly if it's at high strength, but some whiskies are more prickly than others anyway. And you smell it. And if you're doing an evaluation, you would then take notes about what you smell. Then you add a little bit of water. Certainly enough water to take off any prickle, but also to open up the whisky, to allow it to breathe, to become more generous, so you can smell more. Take a decent sip, enough to coat your whole tongue and palate, and hold it in your mouth for a while. Hold it for quite a long time. You may have noticed that I was squishing it about a bit, covering my whole tongue, because there are 4 primary tastes, and what you're trying to do is to establish the balance of these primary tastes. The primary tastes are first sweetness, which is picked up at the front of the tongue, acidity and also saltiness at the sides of the tongue, and dryness or bitterness as you swallow. So you would evaluate the balance of these primary tastes, and also its texture in the mouth, smooth, oily, dry. And when you finish the glass, you would probably pour yourself another one and dispense with all the palaver and just sit back and enjoy it.
What we're known for, this is the whisky that is our biggest seller. It's been named the best whisky in the world in 2008. I'll just pour some. This whisky is made, Ardbeg has the smokiest peat content of all the whiskies. We look at around about 55 parts per million for all the whiskies. So the whisky, the malt that is used to make this whisky is at 55 ppm. Now in the glass it'll be around 18 to 20, which is just slightly more than half of what was in the Blasda. So you can see that the difference in the flavour is going to be quite intense this time. This is matured in 50% first fill and 50% second fill bourbon cask. Since Ardbeg was bought over in 1997, we have that wood policy going forward from it. So you can see the colour, again, is a sort of light golden colour. On the nose, much more pronounced in peat smoke this time, but it's not overpowering in smoke. Ardbeg has a sort of very sort of fruity, lemony, sort of lime nose to it at the front of it as well, so citrus notes there. And the smoke is quite subtle. A lot of this is to do to the way we distill it. On our stills we have a purifier which adds complexity, so as well as smoke we have lots of different other complex flavours in the whisky. Something that's also there is we're making whisky by the seaside, so we've got this sort of briny, salty note or sea note to the whisky as well. This is bottled at 46%, so a little bit of taste first before we add water. Sweet and salty on the tongue first. Explosion of smoke on the tongue, so that peat builds, gets very, very peppery, and at the back it's sort of coffee, espresso coffee, tobacco-y notes on a really big, long, intense finish on it. This will last forever. It's a really long finish. Yeah, a little bit of water. Cut this down. Takes it down a bit, maybe 4 or 5%. Sort of opens it up. I mean, more of that saltiness and the fruitiness really comes out of the spirit now compared to before. On the palate, again, that sweetness comes through, lots of lemon, limes, that citrusy note comes through it. A little bit of vanilla There's also a bit of aniseed now there as well. It sort of really starts to open it up with a little bit of water. And on the finish, again, it builds slowly. A little bit of pepperiness in the tongue, and then the coffee, and the really strong tobacco-y flavour notes at the back. And again, the finish, it goes on for a long time. It will change over time. If you give it a little few minutes, it will change again. Try a little sip, again opens out and give you really much more flavour. So if you can drink this over a 5-10 minute period, you can see all the flavour changes. This is Ugadal. This is the name of the loch, really, that supplies the water to the distillery. It's named after that. Ugadal means dark place. And you can see the water that we use here, obviously, to go with the whisky Ardbeg is very, very peaty. This is the first introduction that with the tastings that we do, where there's actually some sherry wood in this. This is bottled at 54.2% alcohol. It's a vatting of sherry wood, Oloroso sherry wood, and first and second fill bourbon cask. And this gets done 4 or 5 times a year. So we try to get to the recipe as consistently as possible. This one is my favourite. It's one of the Ardbeg that I really, really like. You can see this time in the colour, it's a really rich, deep gold amber colour to it. So the colour is it's much more intense from the sherry wood. It's around about 15 to 20% sherry wood. And mainly Oloroso, Ardbeg and Oloroso sherry wood goes really well together. So this is the first time we've really looked at this one. This one's really rich. It's got this, it's like a really rich fruitcake. It's got sort of dates and raisins, sultanas going through that really rich fruity note. The smoke again is still in the background. It's there, but it's not overpowering. Yeah. And the sherry wood is really well balanced along with the bourbon. This one on the taste is slightly heavier on the taste. It's really rich. A sort of orange tartiness of oranges in there, and sort of these dates sort of come through, and these rich treacly notes come through. There's a little bit of sort of coffee and treacle notes on the background, and the tongue, and the edge of the tongue just covers the tongue all the way around. On the finish, really rich. There's a lot of citrus and sort of aged old. There's leather notes there on it. There's tobacco. It's really one that this one changes all the time. It's really one of my favourites. To me, it just doesn't get any better than this. We'll add a little bit of water to it. I prefer it actually without water. It can stand it without it, but I mean the water really starts to open it out again. On the nose, a lot of these fruits really start to emerge from the glass. That saltiness comes out as well from the sea. Again, but can't emphasise enough, we're making whiskey here by the seaside. We're in the warehouse here, we can smell the salt in the air. If you lick your lips on it, you can lick it off your lips through the winter time. So it adds a lot of flavour to the whiskey. Keep nosing it, getting more fruits. That smoke is a little bit more pronounced. And on the tongue, it's really relaxing now. That sort of leathery dates, raisiny note comes out. That tartness of orange is really pronounced on the spirit now. And at the back, that smokiness is sort of building, and an oiliness there on the tongue. And that sherry wood is really giving it an increased depth of flavour. Really, really delicious whiskey. You should really try this one. It's absolutely perfect. It's a news release here from Ardbeg. This is called Supernova. This is something very different. This is over 100 parts per million of phenols that's been used in the barley here, so it's really, really smoky. It's the smokiest whiskey we've ever produced at the time, made from special distillations of high phenol malt. So this will just be released in April 2009. Comes in at 58.9% alcohol, so it's pretty powerful stuff. You can see on the colour again, not so dark. This is all from mainly bourbon wood. That's in this one. A little bit of sherry wood, but mainly bourbon in this one. So the colour is sort of light to medium coloured gold. Again, the oiliness in the glass. Looking at this is really sort of clings to the glass. With the phenols being oil-based compound, it's really quite a heavy type of spirit. You can see that in the glass. It's just holding on to it. It doesn't want to move at all, and then it just really starts to slowly run down the glass. You can see the legs just starting to appear on it. So really heavy, thick legs on it. So that's a testament to the weight of the spirit. On the nose again, although it is a lot of peat smoke, there's a little bit of fruit notes in there as well. And this one is sort of quite chocolatey, and there's sort of chilly notes to this one as well, but really slightly more pronounced on the smoke, but a sweetness and still a little bit of citrus there on the spirit as well. On this one, that smoke on the tongue, that sweetness first of all, as I've said before, the sweetness and a little bit of citrus notes come through on it again, but a lot of deep chocolate notes, and the smoke just builds and builds. On this one, it's really quite intense, smoky flavour to it. Very, very oily on the tongue. It coats the whole tongue and the side of the palate, the pepperiness on the tongue and at the sides. And on the back of the throat, really heavy chocolatey espresso coffee notes, really heavy, and that sort of chilliness. It's almost like a spicy, chilly sort of note to the back of this. That comes in the side of your tongue and just on the back of the throat. I'll add a little bit of water. I mean, at 58.9, this can stand a little bit more water. Oh yes, as it opens up, the brininess and that saltiness really comes out. That sort of releases, take that strength down. That smoke sort of settles, opens up. More of that salty, briny sea spray comes through it. Or more of the fruitiness, a little bit of floralness. There's a little bit of citrus coming through there now at the moment as well. Then it relaxes again. We get some more of that sort of chocolatey. There's sort of deep bedded fruits in there as well. On the tongue there's that really saltiness, that sort of deep smoky, bacony taste, like tarry rope that we'd get here. Imagine yourself by the seaside, or if you're in a harbour somewhere and you can see the fishermen pulling up the ropes and the creels, you get that sort of intense saltiness and tarriness from it. That gives you that weight and that oiliness that comes through. And then again on the finish now, that's sort of building, that smoke is building the oiliness. It's like linseed oil there on the tongue, the really oiliness. You can imagine linseed oil flavour on the tongue, coating it, getting on the edge of your tongue and then at the back of your throat, the deep espresso, really strong coffee notes, and tobacco, lots of leather going down there as well. Really, really strong finish. And this one will last and last. That peat smoke is really intense as it starts to build, and will go on for a really, really long finish. For such a high smoky phenol whisky, it's really quite exceptional. I mean, it's not just about smoke. There's lots of things going on in there, and it takes time. Don't drink it too quickly. Let it relax and take time, and again the flavours will change on it. But for a really smoky one, it's so complex. Beautiful whisky for a high phenol whisky.